Hi there. We're not going to sing and we're not going to do comedy. This is, closest to me, Laura Caldwell, Jovan Mosley, and Cathy O'Daniel. The name of Laura's book is Long Way Home, A Young Man Lost in the System and the Two Women Who Found Him. Any guesses to who that man is? In a way, though, Cathy, and this is one of the interesting things, that this whole story begins when Jovan finds you, correct?
That's right.
Where?
Division 11, Cook County Jail, maximum security.
And what was happening to you there?
Picture a big pile of bones and an empty jar of barbecue sauce. I was surrounded by a bunch of inmates that were walking freely, and there were no guards to be found anywhere. And the visit that I had had with my client had terminated, and I was just standing there, and I was surrounded by a bunch of guys.
Did you feel threatened? You'd been in, you're a tough defense attorney. You'd been around.
The toughest.
Were you threatened? Did you feel scared?
I was trying not to exude that, but yeah, I was really, really feeling uncomfortable.
Jovan, you saw this, and you reacted in a kind of, it doesn't happen often at that place, a kind of save the damsel in distress mode. What compelled you to do that?
Well, actually, I actually did see a damsel in distress. So when I saw her and everyone just basically heckling her, I walked down there. I was, trying not to be obvious, had a mop and a broom. And I told her to move off to the side so they couldn't see her. And they wouldn't be able to ask her questions or even bother her at all.
When that happened, Cathy, did you think of this as a knight in shining armor, so to speak?
I was a little appreciative, I have to say. I feel like, minus the handkerchief, I did feel like a damsel in distress, and I did feel like this guy rode in on the horse and saved me, and was very thankful to him.
And what you do then at that point is say, well, what are you in here for? That's the shocking revelation that came to you because he said what?
Well, I asked him, I knew we had a little time on our hands, and he was still pushing his broom, and I said, what kind of a case are you fighting? And he told me it was a murder. And I asked how it was going, and he said, I don't really know. And I figured, oh, you must have just arrived here. And he said, no. And I said, well, how long have you been here? 5.5 years.
Let that sink in, ladies and gentlemen.
And I thought, Rick, obviously he'd been up to the appellate court and back down, and I asked him that question, and he said, no. And I asked, well, what's going on your case? Have you had motions to suppress? And he said, no. And I asked, don't you have a family? Isn't anybody out there screaming about this? And he answered, I have a mom, but they never return her calls.
This must have, and you are not, and you and once you told your attorney pal Laura Caldwell, you're not a naive person, and certainly no one who has read stories in the Tribune over the years about prosecutorial misconduct and all sorts of other crazy bad things that go on in the judicial system. This stunned you, did it not?
It stunned me to the point that I got out my business card, and this Prince Charming finally flagged down a guard for me who escorted me out. And I asked that guard on the way out to tell me, what's the story with this kid? Is it really true he's been here for 5.5 years? And when the guard confirmed that, I said, do me a favor, give my card to this kid and tell him to have his mom, who's somewhere in this audience, to call me. And she did.
Jovan, did you think for any moment that this good deed you had done was going to pay off in getting you an attorney? You're a young guy, you don't know the system, and you're thinking, okay, I'm in here for 5.5 years, and okay, maybe I'll be here longer, and the wheels of justice are turning unbelievably slow. Was it a sense of naivete, or just that's the way it is kind of thing?
It was actually just the way it is, being in there, I actually didn't think it was any hope, but after talking to Cathy for a little while and she gave her card to me, I thought that, okay, maybe it's a little hope. But when I talked to one of the clients who she was there to see, he told me this outrageous price that she charges.
And that's true.
So I basically thought that it was over with from then. It's like, I do not have $200,000 to pay her.
Well, I don't have that kind of money. Laura, Laura Caldwell, an attorney, an advocate, and one of the most talented novelists also in Chicago. When and how did you hear about this? I mean, you and Cathy have been friends for a long time.
Actually, we were not close friends. She was renting office space from our friend Beth Caveney, and I knew she was a great criminal defense lawyer, and I called her on a research question for a novel. So I called her. I was writing a book called The Rome Affair. I had some characters in the Belmont police station, and they were trying to force them into confessing. And I called her and said, I know I don't know you very well, but can you talk to me about this issue? Because we'd actually spoken briefly at a book signing afterwards, but I said, give me some more information. Does this ever really happen? Does anyone really, truly get forced into confessing to something they didn't do? And Cathy is a really sardonic, funny person, and I think she said something to the effect of, I give you 2 hours with the CPD, and you would say your mother shot Kennedy.
You'd be on the grassy knoll in Dallas.
Jovan, what was the crime, and what happened?
It was first-degree murder and also an armed robbery I was charged with. What happened was it was a fight that happened, which is common in my neighborhood. Once the fight happened, I decided to leave and not stick around. But I would say 7 months down the line, I was arrested for this fight because someone had passed away in the fight. So I didn't know what was going on.
And when you were interrogated by the police, you said what?
I told the police numerous times that I didn't do anything because originally I didn't know what they were, why I was there. So when I figured out why I was there, I told them that I didn't do anything. I remember the fight, but I left, and no one believed me.
Well, somebody believed you. Cathy, you started digging around, and I would think after a short time, though, I've met some criminals who are pretty slick and sincere and believable. You must have, once you started digging around, said you're taking this case.
Well, clearly it was not like a typical murder case. I'd never represented someone that had worked in a Chicago law firm prior to his arrest, and was so articulate and so beyond the norm of what I'd come to know. But on paper, they had a confession, and they had a bunch of witnesses, and but none of the witnesses ever said he did anything, and that was the main thing. He always said, I was there, I saw it, but I never threw a punch. I never did anything. I never took an affirmative act.
This conversation could go on all night, and I tell you to buy this book, Long Way Home. It's a remarkable story. I want to ask two quick questions before we adjourn this segment. Jovan, how in God's name were you able to keep a moral compass and a sense of humanity spending 5.5 years in prison? That's a tough place to live.
It is. It's very tough. But basically, it's because I am a Christian. My belief in God it's kept me this long, and having a family that's who's there for me, my mother, my wife, my father, having Laura and Cathy here with me to support me.
Well, I'm sure most men would say that same thing under most any circumstances. The moment that grabs me and grabbed me in the book is when you are, any of you who've ever been in a courtroom, there is nothing. Television cannot capture that moment when a verdict is being handed down. What did you guys do in court? When you all stood up.
Should we tell you, or you want us to show you?
Both.
The jury came back in. They'd handed the jury slips to the judge. Cathy and I knew that this man that we had come to love would essentially be gone if we lost him, if we got a not guilty. And so we each just grabbed his arm. I realize now that we had trapped him.
And I was shaking
like he was going to fall over. And we just held on to him and tried to tell him that we were there no matter what.
Very, very tightly.
Were you holding him up, or was he kind of holding you up too?
You know what? That's a question that I don't think any of us can ever answer. I think it was a little bit of both.
Jovan Mosley, Laura Caldwell, and Cathy O'Daniel. It is a classic Chicago story that ends, to my mind, triumphantly. And you, young man, one day may become a lawyer, correct?
That
Will
is
be.
correct.
He will.